Few animals command as much respect and instill as much healthy fear as bears. Hunger, however, heightens their fearlessness and aggression. The hungrier they are, the more likely they are to venture into residential areas, risking encounters with humans. Join us as we recount incidents of grizzlies approaching farms and causing severe injuries. The morning of May 11th, 2024, began like any other in the remote Kamchatka region of Russia. The crisp air was alive with the sounds of nature waking up. Birds chirped in a cacophony of tunes, and the distant rumble of the Avachinsky volcano provided a constant, almost comforting reminder of the region's raw, untamed power. The landscape was a mix of thick forests and open fields, where farmers toiled from dawn till dusk to eke out a living. Ivan, a seasoned farmer with weathered hands and a sturdy build, had been tending to his small plot of land since the early hours. He had lived in Kamchatka all his life, his days marked by the predictable rhythm of the seasons. Alongside him were Vladimir Pavlov and Tarasov, fellow farmers who had shared countless harvests and hardships. Their bond was forged through years of cooperation and mutual support, a necessity in this isolated part of the world. That day, the men worked tirelessly, planting potatoes and cabbages in the nutrient-rich volcanic soil. The harsh winter had just ended, and the brief but intense growing season was upon them. The sun, still low on the horizon, cast long shadows across the field, creating a serene and almost idyllic scene. But beneath this tranquil facade, the wilderness held a dormant menace, one that would soon erupt with terrifying ferocity. Unbeknownst to the farmers, a grizzly bear had been lurking on the fringes of the forest. The bear, an enormous male driven by hunger, had endured a particularly harsh winter. Food had been scarce, and the bear's once robust frame had grown lean and desperate. The scent of fresh tilled earth and the sight of the farmer's livestock grazing nearby had drawn him from his domain. For days, the bear had been inching closer to the farmlands, his primal instincts urging him to find sustenance. In the wild, survival was a relentless, unforgiving game, and hunger was a powerful motivator. The farmers were oblivious to the imminent danger. Their focus was on the task at hand, their minds occupied with thoughts of the coming harvest. As the morning wore on, the bear's hunger reached a breaking point. The beast emerged from the tree line, its dark fur blending into the shadows cast by the dense canopy. It moved with a predatory grace, each step measured and silent. The distance between the bear and the farmers was shrinking rapidly, and soon it would be too late to react. Ivan, Vladimir, and Tarasov worked in a loose formation, each man preoccupied with his row of crops. The rhythmic sounds of hoes striking the earth and the occasional murmur of conversation filled the air. Ivan paused to wipe the sweat from his brow, glancing up at the sky to gauge the weather. It was then that he noticed something unusual out of the corner of his eye. At first, Ivan thought his mind was playing tricks on him. The dark shape moving towards them seemed surreal, like a shadow coming to life. But as the bear broke into a full charge, the reality of the situation hit him with a jolt. He shouted a warning, his voice tinged with panic, but the roar of the approaching beast drowned out his words. The bear barreled into the field, a massive force of nature driven by raw desperation. Chaos erupted as the farmers scattered, their once orderly rows of crops now a scene of frantic movement. Vladimir, closest to the bear, dropped his hoe and sprinted towards the safety of a nearby barn. Tarasov, reacting instinctively, grabbed a shovel and began to shout, hoping to scare the animal away. But Ivan was not as quick. The bear's momentum carried it straight into him, knocking him to the ground with bone-crushing force. The beast's jaws clamped down on Ivan's shoulder, its teeth tearing through flesh and muscle. Ivan's scream was a guttural cry of pain and terror, echoing across the field and sending chills down the spines of his friends. Tarasov and Vladimir, driven by a mix of fear and determination, rushed to Ivan's aid. They wielded their farming tools like weapons, striking the bear with all their might. The bear, startled by the assault, released its grip on Ivan and turned its attention to the two men. With loud shouts and aggressive movements, they managed to drive the bear back, their collective will overpowering the animal's hunger. The bear, realizing it was outnumbered and outmatched, retreated into the forest, leaving a trail of blood and destruction in its wake. Ivan lay on the ground, his body ravaged by the attack. Blood soaked his shirt, and his face was contorted in pain. Tarasov knelt beside him, applying pressure to the wounds in a desperate attempt to stem the bleeding, while Vladimir ran to fetch help. The journey to the nearest hospital was a harrowing one. The small rural clinic was miles away, accessible only by a rough dirt road. Vladimir and Tarasov loaded Ivan onto the back of a pickup truck, their faces etched with worry. The drive seemed to stretch on forever, each bump and jolt eliciting a moan of pain from Ivan. The men took turns speaking to him, trying to keep him conscious and alert. Finally, they reached the clinic, a modest building that served as the lifeline for the local community. The staff, accustomed to dealing with emergencies in this rugged region, sprang into action. They did well to stabilize the injuries before sending him to a big hospital. There, Ivan was rushed into surgery, where doctors worked tirelessly to repair the damage done by the bear's powerful jaws and claws. The procedures were complex, involving multiple surgeries to reconstruct his shoulder and manage the extensive internal injuries. The news of the bear attack spread quickly through the small community, sparking fear and concern among the residents. Encounters with wildlife were not uncommon in Kamchatka, but a bear attack of this magnitude was a rare and alarming event. The local authorities, recognizing the need for swift action, initiated a bear management program aimed at preventing future attacks and ensuring the safety of the rural communities. The program was multifaceted, focusing on both immediate and long-term solutions. Rangers and wildlife experts were dispatched to monitor bear activity in the area, setting up cameras and tracking devices to study their movements. The goal was to identify potential threats before they reached populated areas and to develop strategies for mitigating those threats. Tarasov and Vladimir, having witnessed the brutal reality of nature firsthand, became advocates for the bear management program, sharing their experience and urging others to take the necessary precautions. Mike had always been drawn to the call of the wild. A software engineer by profession, he found solace in the embrace of nature, far from the humdrum of his daily life. The Appalachian Trail, with its sprawling 2,200 miles of rugged beauty, had always been on his bucket list. After years of preparation and shorter hikes, he finally decided to tackle the trail solo. His journey began in early spring. The weather was perfect for hiking, cool but not cold, with clear skies that promised a string of beautiful days ahead. Mike was meticulous about his preparation. He had read countless articles, watched numerous videos, and even attended a workshop on wilderness survival. His backpack was a testament to his thoroughness, packed with essentials and a few luxuries that would make the long trek bearable. By the third week of his hike, Mike had settled into a rhythm. He would wake up with the first light, break camp, and hit the trail. The mornings were his favorite, when the world was still wrapped in the quiet blanket of dawn, and the only sounds were the crunch of his boots on the path and the distant call of birds. The trail was challenging but rewarding, offering breathtaking vistas and moments of profound solitude. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of hiking through steep and rocky terrain, Mike found an idyllic spot to set up camp. Nestled near a stream, the site seemed perfect. The water source meant he could refill his bottles and freshen up after a long day. The surrounding trees provided shelter and a sense of seclusion. He went through his usual routine, setting up his tent, collecting firewood, and preparing a simple but satisfying meal. As he sat by the fire, savoring his dinner, he couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. Each day on the trail was a testament to his endurance and determination. Little did he know that this night would mark a significant and harrowing chapter in his adventure. As the fire died down and the stars began to twinkle in the clear night sky, Mike prepared for bed. He made sure to store his food securely, hanging it from a tree a reasonable distance away from his tent to avoid attracting any wildlife. Bear safety was something he had studied thoroughly, and he was confident he had taken all necessary precautions. The night passed uneventfully. The only sounds were the gentle flow of the stream and the occasional rustle of leaves. At dawn, Mike awoke to the first light filtering through the trees. He stretched, feeling the familiar ache of muscles well used, and began his morning routine. Mike set up his small camp stove and started preparing breakfast, oatmeal with dried fruits and a cup of strong coffee. The scent of the brewing coffee mingled with the earthy smells of the forest, creating a moment of pure bliss. He was in the middle of packing up his gear when he heard a rustle behind him. a sound distinct from the usual forest noises. Turning slowly, Mike's heart skipped a beat. Not 20 feet from him stood a black bear, its nose twitching as it caught the scent of his breakfast. For a moment, man and beast locked eyes, both equally startled. Mike's mind raced. He had read about bear encounters and knew the importance of staying calm. He tried to recall all the advice he had absorbed. Make yourself look big, make noise, do not run. He raised his arms and shouted, trying to appear larger and more intimidating. The bear hesitated, seemingly unsure of the strange creature before it, but the smell of food was too enticing. The bear took a tentative step forward. Mike shouted again, louder this time, waving his arms. The bear paused, then advanced more quickly. Panic surged through Mike. He grabbed a pot and banged it against a rock, the clanging noise echoing through the forest. The bear stopped, but only for a moment. Driven by hunger, it charged. Mike's survival instincts kicked in, but it was too late to avoid the attack. The bear swiped at him with a mighty paw, knocking him to the ground. Pain exploded in his chest and arm as the bear's claws tore through flesh. Desperation lent Mike strength. He kicked out with his uninjured leg and managed to land a solid blow to the bear's snout. The animal, startled and possibly hurt, backed off just enough for Mike to scramble to his feet. He stumbled toward the nearest tree, climbing up to a low branch with every ounce of energy he could muster. The bear, perhaps deciding the effort wasn't worth it, retreated a few paces and began nosing around the campsite, lured by the smell of food. From his precarious perch, Mike assessed his injuries. Blood streamed from deep gashes on his leg and arm. The pain was intense, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had an emergency kit in his backpack, which luckily was within reach. With trembling hands, he fished out a tourniquet, bandages, and antiseptic wipes. He applied the tourniquet to his leg to slow the bleeding, then used the wipes to clean his wounds as best as he could. Finally, he wrapped them in bandages, wincing with each movement. His mind was racing. He knew he needed help, and quickly. The wounds were deep, and he was losing blood. He reached for his satellite phone, a device he had hoped he would never need to use. With a few button presses, he sent out an SOS, including his coordinates. The message was clear. He was injured and required immediate rescue. Hours passed in a blur of pain and anxiety. The bear eventually lost interest and lumbered off into the forest, but Mike remained vigilant, too afraid to leave his perch. He alternated between periods of intense focus and moments where the pain threatened to overwhelm him. He forced himself to stay awake, knowing that slipping into unconsciousness could be dangerous. The sun climbed higher in the sky, marking the passage of time. Each minute felt like an eternity. Then, faintly at first, but growing steadily louder, he heard the unmistakable sound of a helicopter. Relief washed over him. He used his brightly colored blanket to signal his location. The helicopter hovered overhead, and moments later, rescuers descended on ropes, securing him and airlifting him to safety. The flight to the hospital was mercifully short. Medics worked on him during the journey, administering pain relief and stabilizing his wounds. Upon arrival, he was rushed into surgery to repair the damage inflicted by the bear. Hours later, he awoke in a hospital bed, groggy but alive. His leg, chest, and arm were heavily bandaged, and he felt a profound, bone-weary exhaustion. In the days that followed, Mike had plenty of time to reflect on his ordeal. He replayed the events over and over, thinking about what he had done right and what he could have done differently. The encounter had been a reminder of the unpredictability of nature and the importance of being prepared for the worst. The Rocky Mountain National Park, with its serene landscapes, has always been a cherished location for the Mitchell family reunions. This year was no exception. A tradition spanning over 3 decades, it was a time for the family to come together, catch up on each other's lives, and make new memories. The Mitchells were a large, close-knit family with members spread across various states. The reunion was a time to escape their hectic city lives and reconnect with nature and each other. This year, the event was extraordinary for cousins Allison and Benedict, both in their late teens. Growing up, they had always been close, sharing a love for adventure and the outdoors. On the second morning of the reunion, the weather was perfect. The sun cast a golden glow over the landscape, and a cool breeze whispered through the trees. After breakfast, the family members dispersed into small groups, each setting off on different activities. Some chose to relax by the lakeside, Others engaged in friendly games of volleyball, and a few decided to go fishing. Allison and Benedict, driven by their insatiable curiosity, decided to explore a nearby trail. Armed with backpacks filled with snacks, water, and their trusty cameras, they set off on their adventure. The trail they chose was less traveled, a hidden gem that promised breathtaking views and a chance to spot some wildlife. As they walked, the cousins chatted animatedly about their plans. Allison was excited about her upcoming college journey, while Benedict was eager to share his latest photography projects. The trail led them deeper into the forest, where the trees grew taller and the canopy thicker. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating a mosaic of light and shadow on the forest floor. The air was filled with the scent of pine and the sounds of chirping birds. Allison and Benedict marveled at the beauty around them, snapping photos of vibrant wildflowers and towering pines. As they ventured further, the path became narrower and less distinct. Undeterred, they continued, feeling like true explorers blazing their trail. After a while, they came across a small clearing. The sight that greeted them was both enchanting and unexpected. A young grizzly bear cub, no more than a few months old, playing near a fallen log. Its fur was a rich, tawny brown, and it tumbled clumsily as it tried to climb over the log. Allison and Benedict were mesmerized by the sight. They'd seen bears from a distance before, but never this close. They stood still, whispering to each other in excitement and snapping pictures. The cub seemed oblivious to their presence, engrossed in its playful antics. However, their moment of wonder was short-lived. The realization soon dawned on them that where there was a cub, there was likely a protective mother nearby. Their hearts began to race as they scanned the area for any signs of the mother bear. Allison's eyes widened in alarm as she spotted a large, dark shape moving through the trees on the other side of the clearing. The mother grizzly emerged, her massive form towering over the cub. She sniffed the air, her keen senses detecting the presence of intruders. In an instant, the atmosphere shifted from serene to perilous. The mother bears let out a deep, guttural growl, her eyes locking onto Allison and Benedict. Protective instincts kicked in, and without warning, she charged towards them with astonishing speed and ferocity. Allison and Benedict's instincts screamed at them to run, but they knew that fleeing would only provoke the bear further. Allison's mind raced, a mix of fear and adrenaline coursing through her veins. She tried to remember the safety tips they had learned about bear encounters. Stay calm, don't run, and use bear spray if necessary. But the bear was closing in fast, and panic began to set in. Just as she turned to Benedict, she felt a sharp pain in her leg. The bear had swiped at her with its mighty paw, sending her sprawling to the ground. Benedict's heart pounded in his chest as he saw Allison fall. Without a second thought, he reached for the bear spray strapped to his backpack. His hands trembled, but he managed to pull the canister free and aimed it at the charging bear. With a swift motion, he unleashed a cloud of the potent spray directly at the bear's face. The bear roared in pain and confusion as the bear spray took effect. She shook her head vigorously, trying to rid her eyes and nose of the burning sensation. Seizing the moment, Benedict grabbed Allison's arm and helped her to her feet. She winced in pain but managed to stand with his support. Together they backed away slowly, not daring to turn their backs on the bear. The mother bear, still disoriented, gave one last growl before retreating into the forest. The cousins didn't waste a second. They stumbled back along the trail, Allison limping heavily but determined to put as much distance as possible between them and the bear. Each step was a struggle, but the thought of safety spurred them on. After what felt like an eternity, they finally reached the main trail. Allison's leg throbbed with pain, and she could feel blood seeping through her pants. Benedict quickly assessed her injury. The bear's claws had left deep gashes, and they needed to get help fast. Luckily, they met two rangers patrolling. One of the rangers, a seasoned veteran named Miles, knelt beside Allison and examined her wounds. He reassured her with a steady voice, applying first aid to stop the bleeding and stabilize her leg. Another ranger, Lisa, spoke with Benedict, gathering details about the encounter. She praised him for his quick thinking and effective use of the bear spray, emphasizing how it had likely saved both their lives. The rangers communicated through their radios, coordinating a plan to transport Allison to the nearest hospital for further treatment. As they waited for the emergency medical team to arrive, The rangers explained the behavior of grizzly bears and the importance of staying on marked trails. They emphasized that bears are generally not aggressive unless they feel threatened, especially when their cubs are involved. Allison and Benedict listened intently, absorbing the valuable lesson even as they processed the shock of their close call. Soon, the medical team arrived, and Allison was carefully lifted onto a stretcher. Benedict stayed by her side, holding her hand as they made their way to the ambulance. The rest of the family, having been alerted by the rangers, gathered at the cabin, their faces etched with worry and concern. The reunion, once filled with laughter and joy, had taken a sad turn. At the hospital, Allison received prompt medical attention. The doctors cleaned and stitched her wounds, administering pain relief and antibiotics to prevent infection. Benedict remained by her side, offering comfort and support. The ordeal had left them both shaken, but they were grateful to be alive and together. In the rugged wilderness of Tasmania, Australia, a team of researchers had gathered to study the unique flora and fauna of the region. This particular expedition was focused on documenting rare plant species and the elusive creatures that thrived in this remote part of the world. The group consisted of 5 dedicated scientists, each bringing their expertise to the table. At the helm was Dr. Edward Newton, a seasoned botanist with a deep passion for the Tasmanian wilderness. Alongside him were zoologists, ecologists, and a couple of grad students, all eager to contribute to this vital fieldwork. The camp was set up near a secluded part of the forest, far from any human settlements. The dense canopy of towering eucalyptus trees provided a serene and slightly eerie backdrop to their activities. Days were spent trekking through thick underbrush, cataloging plants, setting up camera traps, and observing wildlife. Evenings were filled with discussions, data entry, and the occasional stargazing session. One evening, as the researchers gathered around the campfire, they couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of their surroundings. The sounds of the forest at night were both calming and unsettling. Crickets chirped incessantly, owls hooted from their perches, and the occasional rustle in the undergrowth hinted at the presence of unseen creatures. The team was engrossed in a discussion about the recent discovery of a rare orchid species when a sudden noise interrupted their conversation. It was a low, rumbling growl, unlike anything they had heard in these parts before. The researchers exchanged puzzled glances. Tasmania was home to many unique animals, but this sound didn't belong to any of them. Edward, ever the cautious leader, decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight, he cautiously approached the edge of the camp, scanning the darkness for the source of the noise. As the beam of light cut through the night, Edward's heart skipped a beat. Emerging from the shadows was an American black bear. It was an incongruous sight, entirely out of place in the Tasmanian wilderness. The bear's fur was matted, and it looked gaunt, a clear sign of desperation. It must have been an escaped exotic pet, lost and starving in an unfamiliar environment. The bear's eyes glinted with hunger as it fixated on the camp's food supplies. Edward slowly backed away, signaling to his team to stay calm and quiet. They needed to scare the bear away, but they had to be careful. An encounter with a desperate animal could be dangerous. The team quickly devised a plan. They would use whatever makeshift weapons they had to create noise and frighten the bear. Pots, pans, and metal tools were gathered, and the researchers prepared to make a coordinated effort. Edward gave the signal, and they began banging the items together, shouting in unison to create a cacophony. The bear hesitated, momentarily startled by the noise, but hunger overpowered its fear, and it lunged toward the supplies. One of the younger researchers, driven by a mix of fear and adrenaline, stepped forward to protect the camp's provisions. In the chaos, the bear swiped at him, its claws raking across his arm before sinking its teeth into his flesh. The rest quickly rushed toward both and hit the bear until it ran back into the forest, but the damage was done. The injured researcher clutched his arm, blood seeping through his fingers. Edward quickly assessed the situation and realized they needed to get help immediately. With no cell service in this remote area, their only option was to contact the nearest ranger station via satellite phone. Edward relayed the urgent situation, detailing the bear attack and the need for medical assistance. The rangers assured him that help was on the way, but it would take some time to reach their isolated camp. The team did their best to administer first aid to the injured researcher. They cleaned the wound, applied pressure to stop the bleeding, and used a makeshift splint to immobilize his arm. Hours passed, and the researchers remained on high alert, keeping watch for any sign of the bear's return. Finally, the distant sound of an approaching helicopter broke the silence. The Rangers had arrived. Medical personnel quickly tended to the injured researcher, stabilizing him before preparing him for transport to the nearest hospital. As the helicopter lifted off, carrying their injured colleague to safety, the remaining researchers were left to reflect on the harrowing experience. The presence of an American black bear in Tasmania was a reminder of the dangers posed by the exotic pet trade. Animals like this bear, taken from their natural habitats and sold as pets, often faced tragic fates when they inevitably escaped or were abandoned. The incident sparked a broader conversation within the scientific community and among local authorities. Efforts were launched to locate and capture the bear, not only to protect the local ecosystem, but also to prevent further incidents. The story gained national attention, raising awareness about the illegal trade of exotic animals and the consequences it had on both wildlife and human communities. The following days were a blur of activity. The team continued their research, but their focus was also on assisting the Rangers in their efforts to track the bear. Edward spent hours poring over maps and coordinating with wildlife experts. The bear's unexpected appearance had disrupted their initial research plans, but it had also given them a new sense of purpose. They realized that their work extended beyond cataloging plants and animals. It was about preserving the delicate ecosystems that these species called home. The team's determination paid off when, a week after the initial attack, the bear was spotted near a riverbank. The Rangers moved in quickly and efficiently, using a combination of bait and tranquilizers to subdue the animal. Once sedated, the bear was carefully transported to a wildlife rehabilitation center, where it would receive the care and nourishment it desperately needed. In the heart of British Columbia, there lies a secluded yoga retreat known for its tranquility and immersive connection with nature. Nestled amidst towering pine trees and vibrant wildflowers, the retreat offered a sanctuary for those seeking peace, reflection, and rejuvenation away from the chaos of everyday life. The retreat, a cluster of rustic yet comfortable cabins, was a perfect blend of simplicity and serenity. The retreat had gained a reputation as a haven for those looking to escape and find inner peace. It was run by James, a seasoned yoga instructor and naturalist who had spent years mastering the art of mindfulness and connecting with the wilderness. His deep respect for nature and extensive knowledge of the local environment made him the ideal guide for such an experience. One crisp morning, a diverse group of individuals drawn by the promise of spiritual and physical renewal were gathered on the riverbank for their morning meditation. Among them was Phoebe, a young woman from the city who had come to the retreat to escape the stress of her high-paced job. She had been looking forward to this moment, a chance to clear her mind and connect with the natural world. As the group settled into their positions, James guided them through a series of breathing exercises. The gentle murmur of the river, combined with the rustling leaves, created a soothing backdrop, allowing the participants to sink deeper into their meditative states. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the landscape, and the serenity of the moment seemed almost tangible. The meditation session progressed, with the participants becoming increasingly attuned to the rhythms of nature around them. They were oblivious to the subtle changes occurring in the environment, the sudden stillness among the birds, the distant snap of a twig. James, however, was finely tuned to these signals, and his years of living in harmony with nature taught him to recognize the signs of potential danger. As the group inhaled and exhaled in unison, James felt a growing unease. He opened his eyes and scanned the surroundings, his gaze falling on the edge of the forest, where the shadows seemed to shift. There, emerging from the underbrush, was a grizzly bear. Drawn by the scent of food remnants from the participants' breakfast, the bear's curiosity had led it to the riverbank. James's heart quickened, but he remained outwardly calm. He knew that panic would only escalate the situation. Slowly, he rose to his feet, signaling to the others to stay still. The participants, sensing the shift in his demeanor, opened their eyes and followed his gaze. A collective gasp echoed through the group as they saw the bear, its massive form a stark contrast against the serene backdrop. The bear, initially hesitant, began to approach the group, its powerful limbs carrying it closer with each step. Phoebe, seated nearest to the bear's path, was frozen with fear. With a sudden burst of speed, the bear charged. The peaceful ambiance shattered as the participants scrambled to their feet. Phoebe tried to back away, but the bear was too fast. It swiped at her with a massive paw, knocking her to the ground. Pain seared through her leg as the bear's claws tore through her skin. James sprang into action, grabbing the canister of bear spray he always carried. He aimed and released a cloud of the potent deterrent towards the bear's face. The bear recoiled, shaking its head and retreating into the forest. The bear spray had worked, but the group was left in shock, their minds struggling to process the sudden violence. James rushed to Phoebe's side. Her arm was bleeding heavily and she was in visible pain. The other participants gathered around, their earlier calm replaced by a mixture of fear and concern. James took control, instructing them to bring the first aid kit from the main cabin. The first aid kit arrived, and James quickly assessed Phoebe's injuries. He cleaned the wound as best as he could, applying pressure to stem the bleeding. The participants, though shaken, followed his instructions, helping where they could. The atmosphere of camaraderie that had developed over the days at the retreat now became a lifeline as they worked together to aid Phoebe. James knew they needed professional medical help. He retrieved the satellite phone from his pack, grateful for the foresight of having such a device in this remote location. The call was made, and the gravity of the situation was relayed to the emergency services. The wait for the helicopter felt interminable, but James kept the group focused, encouraging them to breathe and stay calm. The sound of the approaching helicopter was a relief. It descended into a nearby clearing, and the medics quickly took over, stabilizing Phoebe and preparing her for transport. The group watched as the helicopter lifted off, carrying Phoebe to the nearest hospital. The group closely followed Phoebe's recovery. She had been taken to a hospital in the nearest town where her injuries were treated. The doctors were optimistic and her condition stabilized. The retreat participants, now bound by their shared experience, sent messages of support and well wishes. The incident left a lasting impact on everyone involved. For Phoebe, it was a reminder of the unpredictable nature of the wilderness. She had come to the retreat seeking peace, but had instead found herself confronting one of nature's most formidable creatures. Her resilience and the support of her fellow participants became a testament to the strength of the human spirit in the face of adversity. Marcus Müller had always felt a profound connection to the Swiss Alps. For him, they were more than just a stunning natural landscape. They were a sanctuary, a place where he could push his physical and mental limits and find solace away from the bustle of everyday life. On this particular summer morning, Marcus set out early, the air crisp and the sky a clear, unblemished blue. He had chosen to climb one of his favorite peaks, a challenging yet rewarding endeavor. The mountain loomed majestically against the horizon, its snow-capped summit glistening in the early sunlight. With his gear meticulously packed and secured, Marcus began his ascent. The climb was exhilarating, every step up the steep, rugged terrain filling him with a familiar sense of purpose and clarity. He navigated the treacherous slopes with the ease and precision that came from years of experience. The mountain silence was broken only by the crunch of snow and ice beneath his boots and the occasional gust of wind. As he reached higher altitudes, the air grew thinner, and his breaths became more measured, more deliberate. By mid-morning, Marcus reached the summit. The view was breathtaking, a panoramic vista of jagged peaks and deep valleys stretching out in all directions. He allowed himself a moment to take it all in, to feel the triumph of the climb and the serenity of the mountains. After a brief rest and a light snack, he began his descent, knowing that the journey down could often be more complex than the climb up. As he made his way down the mountain, Marcus remained vigilant. The descent required his full attention. One misstep could have serious consequences. He carefully picked his way through rocky outcrops and steep inclines, using his climbing poles for balance and support. His progress was steady and sure, a testament to his skill and experience. It was during one such careful maneuver that Marcus first sensed something amiss. The air around him felt charged, the usual tranquility of the mountains disrupted by an undercurrent of tension. He paused, scanning the surroundings. It was then that he saw it. A large brown bear not far from his path, its massive frame blending almost seamlessly with the rocky landscape. The bear seemed unaware of his presence, foraging among the sparse vegetation. Marcus's heart raced, but he remained as calm as he could. Encounters with wildlife, while rare, were not unheard of in the Alps. He knew that bears were generally not aggressive unless provoked or threatened. Slowly, he began to back away, hoping to avoid any confrontation. However, as he moved, a loose rock shifted beneath his boot, sending a small cascade of pebbles tumbling down the slope. The noise caught the bear's attention. Its head snapped up, and it fixed Marcus with a piercing gaze. The bear's posture changed, muscles tensing, ears flattening, a clear sign of agitation. Marcus knew he had to act fast. He tried to remain non-threatening, making himself appear as non-aggressive as possible while continuing to retreat. Despite his best efforts, the bear began to move towards him, its pace quickening. Marcus's instincts kicked in. He grabbed his ice axe, knowing it might be his only means of defense if the bear attacked. The terrain around him was treacherous, offering little in the way of a safe retreat. Without warning, the bear charged. Marcus swung his ice axe, trying to keep the animal at bay. The bear swiped at him with a mighty paw, and the impact knocked him off balance. He stumbled, his footing lost on the uneven ground. The next thing he knew, he was tumbling down the slope, the world a blur of rocks and snow. He came to a painful stop several meters down. His leg twisted unnaturally beneath him. The searing pain told him it was broken. The bear, still agitated, stood at the top of the slope but seemed to lose interest in him now that he was no longer a threat. It slowly wandered away, leaving Marcus alone with his injuries. Despite the excruciating pain, Marcus knew he had to act quickly. The temperature would drop rapidly as the day waned, and his chances of survival would diminish with the onset of night. Gritting his teeth, he assessed his situation. His leg was clearly broken, but he still had his gear. Using his climbing ropes and some sturdy branches, he fashioned a makeshift splint, stabilizing the injured limb as best he could. The next challenge was to send out a distress signal. Marcus's GPS beacon was a lifesaver, a small but powerful device designed for just such emergencies. With shaky hands, he activated it, sending out a signal that would alert rescue teams to his location. He knew it might take some time for help to arrive, but at least he had made the call. As he waited, he did his best to keep warm and stay hydrated, using his supplies sparingly. The pain in his leg was relentless, but he tried to focus on his breathing, on staying calm. Hours passed, each one feeling like an eternity. Marcus's thoughts wandered to his family, his friends, the people who mattered most to him. He thought about the mountains, their beauty and their danger, and how they had shaped his life. He knew that this experience, no matter how harrowing, would only deepen his respect for the natural world. Just as the last light of day was fading, he heard it, the unmistakable sound of helicopter rotors. Relief flooded through him. The rescue team had received his signal and was closing in on his location. He waved weakly, hoping they could see him. The helicopter circled overhead, then began to descend, a team of rescuers quickly deploying to reach him. The rescue team worked efficiently, and their movements were practiced and precise. They assessed his injuries, administered first aid, and prepared him for evacuation. Marcus was lifted into the helicopter, the pain in his leg momentarily forgotten in the rush of relief and gratitude. As they flew towards safety, he looked out at the mountains one last time, their peaks bathed in the soft glow of twilight.